Good day and welcome. My name is Drake598 Shadow, and I am here today to give you a little bit of a tutorial on all the enemies in Space Hulk Deathwing. So as you can see on the screen, we have a list of all the different enemies. For instance, the Gene Stealer, which is probably one of the most common enemies that you'll come across. Gene Stealers are a species of Tyranid used as the ultimate shock trooper. They are among the most deadly creatures in the galaxy, combining high cunning, lightning-fast reactions and mobility with large and extremely sharp claws that can rip through even the toughest armor in seconds. They are able to track their targets wherever they are and alert other Gene Stealers once a prey has been detected via hive link interlinking telepathy. This creature stalks the victim, preferably from behind. A smart and powerful Xenos, it tries to stay hidden as it flanks its prey, but will fearlessly rush if it has no other choice. So these guys are the basic enemies. The biggest problem with them is, as it says, they will come up from your flanks and behind, and they will come in great numbers. So we'll move on to the next target. The basic hybrids, they use light weapons. They prefer using range attacks and will take cover if possible to fight in more effectively. They use light firearms and inflict light damage. Probably the most numerous of the hybrids at the start of the game. These guys you really do not have to worry about at any point. They are very inaccurate with their firing, and whatever firearms they do have will be pretty weak. So the third generation hybrid. Ranged attack, can use firearms and heavy weapons, inflicts moderate damage. They prefer using ranged attacks and will take cover if possible to fight more efficiently. These guys you will have to worry about a little bit if they use heavy stubbers and missile launchers a lot of the time. The missile launchers can be a bit dangerous at range if you're not that accurate with your weapons, and the heavy stubber can rip apart your armor at close range. So they're two things you want to notice about this guy. Okay, the Stalker strain. Close combat, inflicts significant damage. This Gene Stealer evolution is a life form best suited for tracking and hunting prey. Its body is taller, narrower and thinner, and its skin uses a chameleon biomorph to hide it easily from its prey. Its close combat abilities are even deadlier than a common Gene Stealer strain, using its chameleon-like skin to lurk in the shadows before ambushing its victim. Once the prey has been spotted, the creature will use its inhuman speed to dispatch it. Now these guys are some of the dangerous creatures in the game, as they will be invisible until they're right up close and about to launch their attack, or you have damaged them. A good way to notice them is the shadow that they leave behind is sort of like an imperfect image of what is behind them, or their glowing eyes. They will also jam your radar when they are close, so that is something else to be aware of. And with all these creatures you can see their height in comparison to you on the left. So moving on to the next one. The Warrior strain Gene Stealer. Close combat, range attack, inflicts significant damage. This Gene Stealer strain is a bit bigger and more resilient to damage. Using its biomorphs, it is able to make devastating range acid attacks and will only enter close combat with its prey once it gets close enough. Some Warrior strain Gene Stealers also have gland abilities that release thorax swarms from their deadly bodies, creeping into every hinge and joint of the Terminator's armor. So the acid spit on these guys is damaging but not deadly. The thorax swarm deals very little damage, but it will reduce your stamina gauge. So that's probably the biggest problem with them. As it does say, they will only engage in close combat once able. They will shoot at you while they are trying to close the distance. These guys are a lot more tanky than any of the previous one. You will find yourself putting a lot more shots in them to put them down. A lot of the time these guys will lead the charge, trying to tank some of the hits for some of the lower life forms like this. So moving on to the next strain. Cypher strain Gene Stealer. Close combat, range combat, inflicts huge damage, much bigger, far slower than other Gene strains. The Cypher Strain Gene Stealer has an impressively strengthened carapace that allows it to withstand numerous attacks, virtually immortal in its powerful close combat attack, inflicting tremendous damage. Excuse me there. If prey is sensed or seen, it will pursue the target regardless of its current situation or location. So these guys are the tanks, I guess. A little bit smaller than the tabletop equivalent of, say, a Carnifex or something. But they really do tank a hit. You will spend quite a few shots trying to bring one of these down. Depending on your class, you may not even be able to take it down quickly at all. However, they are very slow, so you can run them around, lose them on objects. They do a charge ability, which you can easily stagger them by running them into a wall or a barricade or something like that. That will slow them down. And they do have an acid spit attack. I'm not sure if this strain has a psychic attack, but I'm pretty sure the later strain of the Cypher does. So yeah, they're relatively easy to deal with, provided you have a group. So the next one, 4th generation hybrid. Ranged combat, can use psychic powers, inflict significant damage. This hybrid psyker will not risk a close combat. It prefers using powerful ranged psychic attacks and will take cover if possible. So I have seen two sorts of ranged attacks from this guy, and he can teleport around. He loves to get around to your flanks and your rear, and he will zap you. He basically has a direct range attack, like the lightning strike from the Chapter Librarian, and he also sort of has a blast down lightning strike, like the Broodlord. So those guys are very, very damaging. They're probably one of the worst creatures to have to deal with in any great number in the game, and they can easily wipe out a whole squad if you were not prepared for it or watching. Moving on. From here on out, they're basically the same creatures until we get to the end. The only difference is once you get past Chapter 6, you will have harder strains of all the Tyrannid forms. If you've watched all my videos, hopefully you have by this point, they take in some of the Space Marine genome, and that is what gives them a hardened carapace and things like that. So we'll just... They're pretty much exactly the same for the first three. The thing that you are going to have to remember is that they are going to tank hits probably 5 times more than any of the previous forms. Especially the warriors, you can shoot them multiple times in the head and they will just keep on coming. So be aware of that. The Broodlord, you will fight him pretty much in the first chapter, especially if you're unlucky. Broodlord, range combat, close combat, inflicts huge damage, can use psychic powers. The final Gene Stealer evolution, its attacks inflict terrible amounts of damage. It is the leader of the Gene Stealer brood, and it is also a powerful psyker. So this guy is a lot faster than the Cypher strain, so you don't really want to engage that or try to run it around. If you're using a ranged combatant, you want to lock it in a door or a corridor or something like that and just shoot it from there. Depends on your situation and your squad. Close combat units can tend to deal with those guys pretty well, so can Devastators. You really do have to keep moving though and be aware of their psychic attack. It is very, very common for them to use it. It is sort of noticeable when they do too. They will lift up their top arms and kind of do a roar kind of thing, and you will notice, and that's when you sort of need to move around. They can do up to 3 strikes in close combat at once, rather than having, say, a charge ability like the Cypher does. That free swipe sort of closes the distance a lot better. But these guys are equally as tanky as the Cyphers, and a lot faster. I do find them to be quite difficult to deal with. The Assault class probably has the best chances of dealing with it, and the Heavy Weapon Specialist probably the second best. Take note of the face on the Broodlord. and the Cypher Strain, as they will still spawn up in later chapters in this form, but they do have a harder strain, and that you can tell by the face. They still have the same sort of body, but the face is completely different, as you can sort of see between the two harder strains there. Moves are pretty much the same. Psychic powers are pretty much the same. You really do need to just watch getting in close combat with those, unless you're a close combat class. So moving on to the Aberranth. Close combat, range combat, can use mining lasers and heavy melee weapons. Inflict significant damage. Misshapen and lumbering, the Aberrants are repugnant offshoots of the Gene Stealer lifeform cycle. Not even the Magnus himself knows what manner of strange processes give rise to an Aberranth. More resistant than their broodkin and sporting free arms, they often wield heavy mining equipment such as the mining laser cannon and the powerful hammer, and the power hammer and the power pick. Even with an I cannot read that word. Tools such as these, their inhuman strength makes them incredibly dangerous. The close combat variants of these are very easy to deal with. They're not really problematic. They will slow you down more than anything. They won't deal any significant sort of damage. The mining lasers come in two different forms. There is one that is sort of a charge laser that you will hear it sort of winding up as it's charging, then will release a big burst that will deal significant damage, and then there is one that is just a constant stream of laser. So you want to try to get in close to those as quickly as possible, and probably deal with the close combat versions at range. Save yourself a bit of time and effort, but be aware the range version is more deadly than their close combat kin. And finally, probably everybody's least favourite of all, the Bioblast Strain Gene Stealer. Close combat inflicts significant damage. Acid sacs cover the torso of this strain of Gene Stealer. Used as a disposable shock trooper by the brood, they explode when injured or will too by the brood's intelligence covering those around them in bioacid. So basically when these guys get close, they blow up to you. They're kamikazes, essentially. I highly recommend 50% acid reduction to reduce these guys' damage, as they're probably one of the deadliest and most common. As no matter what, you're never going to be able to kill all of them. They're just far too common, and they can sometimes come into waves of 3 or 4. So, yeah. Main thing is just be aware the faces change when you get the harder forms. As you can sort of see, they all have tentacly faces rather than just normal flat and yeah. And you can see their height equivalent to the Terminator again. But thank you very much for tuning in. I have been Drake598 Shadow. If you have enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a comment or a like down below. Thank you very much for watching.